You know, the exact moment you hit send on a message, or fire up a streaming video, or tap to make an online payment, what actually happens? We kind of tend to think of the internet as this invisible, magical cloud just floating up in the sky somewhere. But honestly, the reality is so much more physical, incredibly complex, and frankly, way more fragile than you might think.
Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to dig into how the internet actually works. We're going to completely demystify the whole system. For you, unpicking the complex logical rules, the crazy ocean floor hardware, and the high-stakes business deals that basically keep every single one of us plugged into the digital world.
All right, so here is our agenda for today. First, the invisible architecture. Second, the ocean's hidden highways. Third, the business of connectivity. And finally, number 4, sabotage and security threats. Let's get right to it.
Starting off with Section 1, the invisible architecture.
So, taking a 30,000-foot view here, the internet isn't actually just one giant homogeneous network. It's really a massive global collection of independent networks, often called autonomous systems, that are all stitched together by routers. This foundational architecture dates way back to the early days of DARPA and the ARPANET, and it was specifically designed to handle brand new types of networks as they popped up over time. It's a brilliant setup, perfectly captured by what's known as the hourglass model. Picture an hourglass. You've got this super wide top that represents a massive diversity of applications like video streaming or email. Then you have a wide bottom, representing all the different physical hardware out there, whether that's Wi-Fi, Ethernet, or fiber optics. But the magic is really in that narrow center. The Internet Protocol, or IP, acts as this universal spanning layer right at the thin waist. Basically, everything above it absolutely must rely on IP, and everything below has to support IP. It creates this one unified standard that holds the entire system together.
Okay, so we've got all these independent networks speaking the common language of IP, but how do they actually hand data off to one another? Well, to move packets of data between these different autonomous systems, routers rely on something called the Border Gateway Protocol, or BGP. You can really just think of BGP as the absolute glue of the internet. It's out there constantly updating and exchanging routing paths so that the second your data leaves your local network, your edge routers know exactly which neighboring network to hand it off to so it reaches its final destination.
That brings us to Section 2, the ocean's hidden highways.
Now, those routing paths we just talked about, they aren't just invisible lines of code floating in the ether. They require some seriously massive physical infrastructure. Just consider this staggering number for a second. 1.39 million. That is the number of kilometers of subsea cables currently lining the ocean floor. These literal underwater highways carry roughly 99% of all intercontinental data traffic. I mean, we are talking about the physical infrastructure that makes trillions of dollars in daily financial transactions, all our private communications, and vital global government intelligence actually possible.
You'd probably think these things would be massive, right? But despite carrying the literal weight of the modern world using multiple light wavelengths shot through optical fibers, these cables are surprisingly thin. They're often no thicker than your average garden hose. Inside that hose, you've got ultra-pure silica glass fibers that are basically the thickness of a human hair. Those are surrounded by protective layers, things like petroleum jelly, polycarbonate, aluminum water barriers, and steel wire. All of that is just to help them survive the incredibly harsh, freezing, and highly pressurized environment down on the deep seabed.
Historically, if you were laying one of these multi-million-dollar cable projects, it was funded and built by large consortiums of traditional telecom companies. But today, the landscape has completely shifted. Because of the absolute explosion in bandwidth needed for cloud computing, modern tech hyperscalers, think Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, they now own or lease around half of all global subsea cables. They're out there building their own private underwater interstates to directly and securely connect their massive data centers all over the world.
Moving right along to Section 3, the business of connectivity.
So actually connecting two of these independent networks isn't just a technical challenge. It's a high-stakes financial negotiation. On a practical level, there are two main ways networks connect, which we call peering. First, there's public peering. This usually happens at an internet exchange point, which acts kind of like a massive community switchboard, where multiple networks plug in and exchange traffic freely. Then on the flip side, we have private peering. This happens when two specific networks exchange so much data with each other that it makes way more sense to just bypass the community switch entirely. Instead, they use a dedicated physical point-to-point cable, a cross-connect, to bridge their routers directly to one another.
If you look at the global density of these Internet Exchange Points, or IXPs, you can see exactly where these crucial connection hubs are clustered. It's predominantly in North America, Europe, and parts of Asia and South America. And these hubs are so incredibly vital because they allow local traffic to stay local. Think about it. If you're emailing your neighbor down the street, your data really shouldn't have to bounce across an ocean to another continent and back. IXPs reduce those network hops, which drastically cuts transit costs for service providers and greatly improves the overall resilience of the internet.
Now, the unsung heroes orchestrating all of this behind the scenes are called peering coordinators. These are really unique professionals who have to bridge the gap between deep technical network engineering and high-level business development. They're the ones deciding whether a network's peering policy is going to be wide open to everyone, highly selective, or entirely restrictive. And for the really large networks, a well-negotiated peering agreement by one of these coordinators can literally save millions of dollars in transit costs every single year.
Which leads us directly into our final section, Section 4, Sabotage and Security Threats.
For all its brilliance, this incredibly complex system is terrifyingly fragile. The physical infrastructure keeping us online generally faces 4 major threats. The most common one? It's actually just accidental damage from routine maritime activity, like a fishing trawler dragging its anchor and snagging a line. Then you've got geographic choke points, places like the Red Sea or the Malacca Strait, where cables are densely packed together, meaning one bad incident could trigger cascading global outages. But increasingly what we're seeing is the rise of deliberate, state-sponsored sabotage, along with highly sophisticated cyber espionage aimed at intercepting sensitive data right from the infrastructure itself.
And remember BGP, that glue of the internet we talked about? Well, the massive flaw with BGP is that it was built entirely on trust. It simply lacks built-in security to verify if a routing path is authentic. Attackers exploit this all the time through something called an IP prefix hijack. Basically, a malicious network just advertises to its neighbors, "Hey, I'm the best path for this specific IP address." BGP blindly trusts it and propagates that fake route globally. The terrifying result is that your data traffic gets seamlessly rerouted away from where it's supposed to go, and it's dropped straight into a digital black hole where it disappears completely.
Back in the physical world, the threats are honestly just as insidious. State actors with advanced deep-sea capabilities can easily sever these vital underwater cables. And the worst part, they routinely disguise acts of sabotage as simple maritime incidents. Oops, just a clumsy commercial ship dragging an anchor, nothing to see here. Because pinning down attribution is so incredibly difficult, it gives attackers a free pass to disrupt communications, financial markets, or even military operations with virtually no immediate international retaliation.
Furthermore, the threat isn't just lurking down in the deep ocean. The spots where these subsea cables finally come ashore, these highly secure facilities known as cable landing stations or the dry plant, are massive vulnerability points. Historically, these were just simple physical buildings, but today they're managed by complex internet-connected software platforms, meaning a hostile state doesn't necessarily even need a submarine to cut a cable anymore. They can simply execute a modern cyber attack on the landing station's network management software to reroute, manipulate, or completely shut down global data flows from a laptop.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I think it's pretty clear. The internet definitely isn't magic. It is a highly physical, deeply interconnected, and surprisingly vulnerable ecosystem built on underwater garden hoses, high-stakes business negotiations, and blindly trusting digital handshakes. The next time you log on, ask yourself, just how secure is this fragile, invisible infrastructure keeping your digital world afloat? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today.